Welcome to the Business Growth Masterclass, where business growth is made simple. Listen as we interview real business owners and learn from their wins, their losses, and everything in between. Today's guest is a published author, former LCU business professor of 22 years, and the current founder and CEO of Crockett and Company, a professional development company offering leadership coaching, training, and seminars. So she is a leadership guru. If you want to learn how to be a better leader in your business, this is the episode for you. Without further ado, welcome to the podcast, Miss Kathy Crockett.
Hey, thanks. Glad to be here.
Thanks for being here.
You bet.
We've been looking forward to this one.
I before we got on the podcast, I prefaced this a little bit. You were my one and only LCU being Lubbock Christian University business professor.
I love it when I get the science guys to come take business classes. It's awesome.
It was awesome. And so she twisted my arm, but it was a business class where you kind of studied all of the different, mechanisms in the economy, but the culminating project was a week-long trip to New York City with all my best friends from college. And it was an amazing experience. And she led us all along the entire week with 30 college students. It was a good time.
That sounds like a party to me.
Oh man, it was great.
Okay, so Business Growth Masterclass. This is a business improvement podcast. And so I wanted to start off with, what are you currently doing? I know you've had a distinguished career, but what are you currently doing?
To boil it down, I'm trying to empower leaders to lead well. I've seen a lot of leaders do it right, do it wrong. But I think ultimately, I really want to encourage leaders that you don't have to sacrifice your health, your family, and other things to be an excellent leader. You can do both. You can lead well, not only with excellence, but also for your well-being as well.
So you are a business consultant and you teach leadership training, right?
I do. So kind of how it works is we have a variety of ways that we try to do that. So it starts with executive groups. And so I have probably 12 to 15 leaders from different industries that get together one afternoon a month for 6 months or on a long weekend for an experience. And we do case studies and of course they tease me. They're like, that sounds so academic, a case study. That sounds like homework. But basically what it is each person gets to bring their biggest problem or their biggest opportunity. I should say challenge, right? Their biggest challenge or their biggest opportunity at the table. And everyone else serves as their board of directors to give them feedback. So it's a confidential place where business leaders can come and bring ideas and get feedback. Because sometimes that's hard to get when you have an idea who's your sounding board, who are your safe people, who are your even seasoned professional people who might have great perspective and ideas. And so that's probably a big piece of what I do. And then from that leads to our leadership conferences, executive coaching, and corporate trainings.
That sounds awesome. So the folks that are in this group, what do you call it?
We call it our Leadwell executive groups.
Okay.
And pretty much either I know this leader and trust them implicitly, or someone recommends them word of mouth. We don't really mass market it. It's not that we're trying to be exclusive. It's just we're very intentional of who's in the groups. We want to do different industries. We want to make sure there's not supervisors or any kind of relationships like that in the room together. Competitors are not in the room together. That way everyone can come in and just relax, catch their breath. They don't have to be the smartest person in the room for 4 hours, where they're just bombarded with question after question after question and fire after fire to solve. And it's just a really great synergy in the room of all these high-level leaders. I like to say when you get 12 to 14 high-octane, amazing leaders who have similar values in a room, it's really interesting to see what happens with the synergy of that and how that comes together.
Very cool. Well, so how did you even get into that in the first place?
Well, I had a mentor. I'm super grateful for the mentors in my life. Dr. Ken Jones, who was president of the university at LCU for many, many years, is one of my mentors. And he created an opportunity for me to be part of the Townsend Leadership Program, which he had just completed the year before. And so basically one day a month, I went to Dallas and it was me and 12 other executives. And I was a little intimidated because these were CEOs of companies, managing millions and billions of dollars. So I learned so much from them on strategy and things, which I love to bring back to the classroom. But then Dr. Townsend's also a clinical psychologist. So he
Wow.
actually, again, started this journey for me of thinking you don't just have to run yourself on the ground to be successful. You can be healthy. So I actually stopped making eye contact after a while because I didn't want him to analyze me emotionally. But he did kind of get in our grill a little bit and really kind of got underneath. Why are you working yourself so hard? What's driving you? How are you taking care of your people? How are you taking care of yourself? So it really started a journey of I really wanted to bring that back to Lubbock. And those started back in 2014. So we've been doing them for about 11 years. So it's been a really great journey of just learning something. And then we do it a little bit differently. But that concept of having a core group of people getting together from different industries was a powerful one that I loved.
Wow. I love that.
Yeah, there's so many different versions of like coaching or consulting or so this wide spectrum. And I was in one of your Leadwell executive groups, and it was just very different. I've done different iterations of coaching my entire career. And some of them are more practical and tactical, which is, how Kellen and I are wired. And then some are more, emotional IQ and how are you as a leader? How are you taking care of your people, and kind of more leadership centric.
Mm-hmm.
And yours was that to me. And I don't know if you would describe your program as that, but it was very leadership centric and kind of got in your head a little bit of why do you do this? What does that look like 10 years from now? Is your family taken care of? Are you taken care of? Is your community taken care of? And that was just a very interesting take, and something that I feel a lot of times is undervalued. You know, the bottom line, the profit, that's everybody's looking at that. Everybody knows how valuable and important that is, but taking a step back and looking at the leadership and culture and all of those things that can fill woo is really important for, a long-term healthy business, community, and family. So
I kind of learned this way too, because I used to be like, I got to get stuff done.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, put the feelings over there. We got to get stuff done. And I think what our groups we try to do is we try to be very, very strategic. The case studies are very tactical. I mean, it's very much what are you going to do with this tomorrow? And we also try to take these very complex theoretical concepts, and I really tried hard to boil it down to a napkin where it's an actionable step. So I do love that you did feel the emotional side because we do lean in hard to the relationships because that's part of the group is I really want people to network and to develop some relationships that could be personal relationships when you leave or even professional ones. There's a lot of networking that goes on and a lot of business gets done in these groups as well. And so, but it goes back to what I said at the beginning. You can be an excellent leader and business person who's getting stuff done and strategically savvy and smart and going after some huge things, but it doesn't mean you have to run yourself on the ground. I firmly believe there's a way that you can do it both ways. You can have your family and your health and a life outside of work that's very robust and abundant and still be knocking it out of the park professionally in your business and hitting these huge goals and these big swings you're going for.
Got to be intentional. So we glossed over a little bit, but tell us a little bit about that initial journey. So you went to these. What was the program?
The Townsend program. It was
The
for a full
Townsend
year,
program.
for a full day. So it was quite a financial investment as well as for time, especially for a professional who had kids, one child in junior high and one in high school. So my husband supported me immensely to be able to pull that off. And so it was just a really important season. And so I learned a lot. And as a teacher and professor, you always wanting to bring things back to the classroom. I love Lubbock. My community matters a lot to me. I believe strongly that if the leaders in Lubbock get better, our community gets better. And so I felt strongly that I wanted to come and reinvest some of that I had learned back in Lubbock as well as at LCU. So that's kind of where it all began like 11 years ago. And then it's kind of unfolded from there.
Tell us about the first couple of years of getting this up and going. Did you just open the doors and you had a wait list, or what did that look like?
Well, the first few that we had, I was still at LCU as a full-time professor. And again, they would allow us to have some time to do consulting work. And so that was wonderful. It was kind of our pilot one, and a lot of people came. Well, then I had to make a hard decision. My kids were in high school at that point, and I actually suspended the groups for a few years so that I could fully engage in my family and really enjoy those last few years of high school. Because I know that the word balance gets kind of bannered around a little bit of how do you have balance. And I just want to say, I don't think that's the goal. I see it more of like a swivel stool. Sometimes you will intentionally lean into your business and put a lot more time and focus and energy there. And then other times you'll lean way more into your family, and maybe put some things that you were going to launch in your business, save it for the next quarter or the next year.
Mhm.
And so I had a lot of clients that came to me because I was also doing corporate trainings back then, and I was also doing some coaching. And and speaking engagements, and they were asking me, "Hey, would you travel? Will you come do this and that?" And I said, "Well, if you'll circle back around in 3 years, I'm going to pick this back up and do it more. But for now, I'm really leaning into enjoying the last few years of my kids being home in high school." And it was a risk, right? It's a risk sometimes if you don't take an opportunity that's emerging and you want to jump on it. That's a temptation. It took everything in me to hold that boundary. It's not that I completely stopped, but I really did just take care of current clients. I weren't taking new ones. And I was really pleasantly surprised that 3 years later, they swung back around. And then in 2019, when I retired, I thought I would be doing more of this. I was getting more and more requests. And honestly, I didn't fully know what I was going to do. My boss is even saying, "Why are you leaving? Do you have an offer?" And I was like, I just feel like my heart is getting tugged on. I'm a Christian, and I feel like perhaps the Lord was just tugging on my heart to consider something else. I was very involved in nonprofit work that meant a lot to me. And so I also had aging parents. We were getting into that season and I thought maybe my parents might need me, but they didn't. They're fine. And then COVID hits. Isn't that hilarious? You think that you're going to launch something. So then December of 2019 is when I retired. And so spring of 2020, I actually had already met with some colleagues and we were about to launch these groups together. We had this whole plan. It was going to be so exciting. We didn't necessarily know we were going to do that in the December of 19. I actually retired not fully understanding exactly what I would be doing, but things started emerging. Well, then COVID hit, and who's going to invest in culture and leadership development during that season, right? So I actually had another stint where I served a nonprofit that I cared about. It was a school, and they just needed someone to be an interim leader for them while they were in between leaderships. And so I did that for 8 months. And we didn't even really start the executive groups back up. I mean, we did it before COVID, obviously, but we were trying to. It took 2 years to get them going again because everyone was kind of pausing for a second to think about that. So, as a business owner, what do you do? I mean, you're like, I need revenue. We were going to launch this. And
Yeah.
just from a practical standpoint, I just had to trust and get creative and start with other things that people were ready for. They may not have been ready for the executive groups, but they were ready for our leadership conference, which is where we started.
Well, the number one thing that I take away from that, there's so much in what you just said, but the flexibility that is required of anybody who's doing business, because you never know what's around the corner. You never know what surprise is going to happen in the economy or, whatever it was in your case, COVID, and just having the mindset that you can figure it out. And I love the swivel stool example you just gave, because you're the second person that we've had on this podcast that kind of dismissed the idea of balance in the way we normally think of it. But like, what season of life am I in? And what do I need to lean into at this moment? I think that really resonates. And I think that's a great thing for business owners to hear, because you can't always be all things to all people. And if you try to be, something's going to break down. Um, you know, we've talked to several business owners and some people who are, swim in circles with some very highly successful, industry leaders. And it's rare for one of those people at the very top of their game to have a healthy marriage and their kids, have a good relationship with their kids and also have the professional success that they're chasing. And sometimes people don't realize what trade-offs they're making until it's too late. So I really appreciate the wisdom that you're bringing there about knowing, like, not just being intentional on that stool, I guess, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm choosing what I want to lean into, and I'm not going to accidentally lean into something and later look back and be like, oh no, my marriage fell apart because I was too hyper focused on the business at that point or whatever, and trusting that things will come back around when the time is right, which you did. So that's really cool. Um, on that note, do you think that's one of the biggest struggles that you see business owners face? Or what other things would you say are very common when you work with these leaders in their business? What are some of the, you know, telltale signs that they've got something a little bit out of calibration?
I think it's different for everyone, but I do know another mentor said fatigue is a thing.
Hmm.
And this is really what Townsend used to say. And even another mentor called Bob Beal, his name is Bob Beal. He has this concept of leaders often will get fatigued and then they start getting in a fog And then they start flirting with things that they would never flirt with, like maybe overworking or ignoring their family. And nobody wakes up in the morning and says, you know what I'm going to do this week? I'm going to intentionally work ridiculous hours and not be home one night at all to put my kids to bed. And I'm going to ignore my wife or my husband. And I'm not even going to notice that they come in and out of a room because I'm so focused on work. I'm going to get home from work and then take a bite, 2 bites, and then I'm going to immediately go back to work. I don't think anybody intentionally says this is going to be their life long term, but it starts slowly happening. And so back to this idea of when you get tired and fatigued or pressure starts sitting in, you start getting in a fog and you're not making wise decisions and you don't even know it. You're too close to it. And then you start flirting with decisions, which interestingly enough, I have seen this happen with quite a few leaders. And one of the reasons that I was at this organization as an interim leader is because the leader who was there made a terrible decision. And I believe it's because he was fatigued and was making not himself. It would not be something I would have ever expected. Everyone was shocked that this decision was made, and sadly, he's actually still in prison. And so it was. I've seen the shock waves that happen when leaders do not pay attention to their energy, and they don't have people around them. Something else that's another practical tip that I would love to share that I think our groups give people: you need a personal board of directors who you can go to, and they know all your stuff. You'd be trust them with your financials. You trust them with your family. They know all your things, and they will hold you accountable. Because sometimes leaders, the farther up you go in an organization, it's extremely difficult to get reliable feedback. So that's one thing I talk to the leaders about a lot. Where are your feedback loops? And if there's a leader that doesn't have any kind of feedback loops and they're isolated, that is something that I definitely talk to them about as a threat to their success and to their ability to lead well.
So for a business owner listening to this and thinking, wow, I've got that risk, I don't have a good feedback loop, how do they start building that board of directors like you describe it?
Well, Townsend was talking to me about it, and I didn't have one either. And I was like, well, great. What am I supposed to do? You kind of might have mentors that you respect. I would even encourage you, if you're a business leader, look at people who are further down the road that you highly respect and see if they might meet with you for coffee once a month and see if they could be a sounding board for you. I encourage people, you want to have at least one person. It can't just be your spouse or you're going to wear them out. You need some other people to process some stuff with, preferably outside your family, and at least one person outside of your place of business. And maybe even if you're super, super involved at your church, that's a great place, but even maybe one person who's not at your church, just to get different perspectives. And it doesn't have to be a lot of people, but it has to be some. And I would just say, you just check in periodically. And if you have a huge decision to make, like when I was trying to make a really large decision about retiring from LCU, I probably had about 8 people on that decision with me that I was asking for advice. I was seeking wise counsel. I was making sure I didn't have blind spots. And some of them, and then when I was agreeing to be the interim leader of this organization, I had another 10 people probably on that one because that one was fast and a hard and a huge commitment and a lot was at risk. And there was a lot going on. And so one of the leaders even said, this is going to age you. And if you ever want to do business in this town and something doesn't go well, they're going to blame you and you won't get to do other business. You need to go into this with your eyes wide open. And I was like, so glad I asked. Why? So sometimes you don't always even hear what you want to hear. They're the people in your world that will tell you the things you don't want to hear. Yeah. Who are those people in your world? Do you have anyone like that? Who are they?
That's so good.
I don't remember where I initially heard this concept, but we hit on this concept in Leadwell, and I just want to give a practical example. For me personally, it's looking at every area of my life, and so as a dad, as a husband, as a Christian, those are kind of the non-negotiables. And so who are guys that I really admire them as a father? I think of a man from my hometown who, has a family business that's very successful, and all of his kids are like God-fearing, hardworking, like good kids. And so he's like one of those dads that I'm like, how do you do that?
Yeah.
And so, reaching out to him periodically throughout the year, and whether it's just a phone call or a coffee or whatever, it can be 2 times a year for some of these things. But then on the more practical side, I'm looking at our business, and we have a real estate business. And so I have a handful of different guys that are further along in their career than me. And an example from just this week, I had a emergency pop up of an issue I'd never dealt with. And so in an afternoon, I talked to 3 different guys that are rock stars in my industry that have been there and done that and had sage wisdom right there in that moment, people they could introduce me to help solve this problem. But the only reason I was able to talk to those guys is those 2 to 3 coffees or breakfasts a year, and just continuing to pursue relationship with them. And it can be that easy. It can be that easy as, you've got 5 guys or girls that you want to intentionally go to lunch or coffee with throughout the year that you develop real relationship with, that whenever you come up against an obstacle or you hit a wall of that fatigue and fog, and things are hard, that you have people to understand what you're going through and can advise you because they've been there and they've done that. And that's such a practical thing that requires a lot of intentionality, but boy, in times like today, with the economy like it is today, it's invaluable.
Yeah. There's a book that this is making me think of, fasting or Thinking Fast and Slow. I think it's Daniel Kahneman. Have y'all read that? And he talks about the idea that, I mean, you see this in other places too, but how we're much better at seeing other people's mistakes than recognizing our own. And it's so powerful when you have people around you. And what you said was key earlier about the idea that I need somebody who's going to tell me the truth, and who I'm close enough to that will say the hard things. And I need to be willing to hear them and, not just go with whatever I want to believe. I think as human beings, we think better when we're in a community of people that help us. And so that's such a powerful thing that you're talking about here.
Can I also just touch on it? This personal board of directors, you mentioned relationship. It's also a resource you draw from. So you mentioned, how do you know if you're fatigued or even burned out? And this is something else that Townsend taught us. He would try to boil these really complex things down to little napkins and formulas. And so he said, really, burnout is nothing more than the ratio between the responsibilities you have and the resources you have to fulfill those responsibilities. So if you're feeling, typically that's top heavy. Don't we all feel like we have way too much to do and not enough time, money, talent, all the things? Yet if you can be wise about it, there are ways you can influence your responsibilities and you can influence your resources. So you have 2 options, right? You can either get more resources to kind of balance it out, or you can get more savvy about your responsibilities. And I find that we like to come at it from both directions. And so from the responsibilities, you can ask yourself, the question at times, what are we doing? Why am we doing it? And what is my role? Sometimes things shift and we don't shift roles. We keep carrying all this responsibility that actually is not ours to carry anymore. Leaders are notorious for that.
Yes.
And so just kind of stopping for a second and saying, hey, what is my role now? And asking, if you're feeling like you're overwhelmed with too much, just ask those 3 questions. Okay, what am I doing and why am I doing this? And what is my role in this? And has it shifted? Am I carrying things I don't have to carry, which is making the responsibility heavier? The flip side of that is resources. Typically, there are a lot more resources than we just go to quickly. Of course, money, time, talent, technology are the quick ones. But get creative. These relationships can be a huge source of resource for you that could really help you not get burned out. So that's another piece of the puzzle of this board of directors isn't just necessarily mentoring. It is that for sure, but it is a legitimate resource. You may not show up on your balance sheet or your spreadsheets or your budget, but the speed of trust and people who have knowledge for you to give it to you quickly so you can make a decision in a timely manner. I don't know if you can put a price on that. So it is worth the time. So sometimes when you're trying to get stuff done and you're like, where am I going to fit that in? Well, it'd be great if I had the luxury to go have coffee with someone. Create the space. It will pay dividends.
And you never know what that coffee might lead to with a connection that you need or relationship. There's so much that's kind of hard to quantify in that, but it's there. And as a business leader, you need to tap into that. That's great. I love the ratio too.
She's full of those like little nuggets like that. One more point about the swivel stool illustration, and I love this, and it's so true that as a husband, like communicating, we're in a season. A lot of times, like my wife and I will have those kind of come to Jesus moments where like, okay, right now we're in a season. This isn't forever. This is a season that will pass. And this is, kind of the horizon of that, where, all right, we're going to have to make some different decisions right now. We're not going to be able to go on a large family trip with our entire family this year, or go and visit this person as often, because we're going to focus on this for this season that will allow us to do other things in the future. And I think just communicating that with those in your life really helps them understand you, and it also creates some accountability in yourself that I think is so important. And, just personally, like, there's a lot less arguments and misunderstandings when you're clear about what's happening.
Right.
Okay. One of your accolades in the introduction was author.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about that. I don't think I know much about that.
Well, it's interesting. So in 2014, actually, we published our first book, and it was these leaders who actually had these epic life stories. And I actually, again, since I'm a Christian, I was really wrestling with, my expertise was leadership journals. How about a textbook, chapter? How about a leadership article? How about some curriculum for something? And all of a sudden I find myself writing, kind of facilitating a book of authors, of people sharing their personal life stories. And these were leaders. These were leaders who I knew. Many of the people in the books are people maybe that have been in the Leadwell executive groups, or they've been a client, or I've known them through business. And then I've had the privilege of walking out maybe a really hard life season that they were in. And then they would say, someday I'm going to write a book. Someday I'm going to write a book. And then it just came around. So we've just published our fourth one, actually. It just came out in February. And
Wow.
so from someone back in 2014 who said, okay, fine, I'll do one and then I'm done and then I can check it off. Well, now we do four. So we have 3 women's books and 1 men's book. And there's some leaders in Lubbock, really all over the country. But for example, one of these leaders, she and her husband in 2020 launched a business. He's an inventor. She was selling some of his things at on Etsy and at craft shows. Well, now it's $1 million in sales on Amazon, and they just got a deal on Shark Tank.
Wow.
And so the whole time they're building this business from 2020 to today, where they literally 2 weeks ago were on Shark Tank, or that's when the episode aired. And they got a deal from Mr. Wonderful even. So that was an accomplishment for them. But the whole time they had this epic story with their daughter's health. And so the book, the Courageous Woman of Faith book, her story in the book has nothing to do with them building this epic, crazy business ride that they've been on. They're entrepreneurs. They were going after this together. Then they're talking about their daughter and this health journey that they've been on with her. So that was the Courageous chapter. A lot of folks I think Holly Beatonbow would be fine. We've become friends, and many people knew Rick Beatonbow with the Beatonbow Homes, is a very well-known company in Lubbock. And her chapter shares about what it was like when Rick went to be with the Lord. What was that like for her to be a widow? And how she chose to, she's also a Christian, so she chose to lean into her faith. So it's her personal side. So people might know the business person, but these books actually focus on maybe some more personal pieces of their life, which is actually pretty cool, because they had no idea that they're having to show up for work every day, but they're going through this really hard thing, to just show that it's possible to still be a very successful professional and also still show up for your family, even in the hard things, and keep your faith when you might be wondering what's going on. So it's a huge privilege that I get to walk with these authors and deepen relationships that we have. One of the stories also was about Mallory. I don't know if y'all remember Mallory Maddox.
I do.
She had the brain bleed and the volleyball. So her mom wrote a story, and then her dad and her boyfriend at the time wrote their version of what that was like. So it's just super interesting to get their perspectives on that.
Inspiring stories. So what are the names or what are the book titles?
Courageous Women of Faith and Courageous Men of Faith. So they're on Amazon, but yes.
We're going to have to check that out. And was the couple that were on Shark Tank, was that the Dome Doc?
Yes.
Was that, okay.
Chelsea and John Giles.
Yeah, I thought that might be who you're talking about. That's very cool. Oh. Wow. Well, got to get out there on Amazon and buy this book.
I know. Okay. We've talked a lot about wins and different seasons in your career. I'm sure it wasn't always sunshine and rainbows. Maybe you could walk us through some of the lows and the valleys and how you were able to navigate that.
Sure. I would say that we had a program at LCU that I had the privilege of leading. And in many, the word season has come up a lot. And I think that's extremely relevant for any business leader. You have to be mindful of the seasons that come and go. Even when I would teach strategy in our master's in leadership program, we would talk about, just the classic bell curve, right? You have the S curve that goes up and then you kind of start going off the back end unless you start trying to figure out new ways to re-innovate yourself, because competitors now come in the market and it's harder to compete. And so we had a program that was very, very successful. I had the privilege of getting to help build it out and build curriculum for it. Loved it. It was just like the most fun I've ever had professionally. It was just amazing. And students were loving it. And there came a season to where we didn't have the same competitive advantage. We kind of were a first mover because we were a smaller university and we were agile and could move quickly.
Yeah.
And then when the larger universities came to play in a similar program, it was more difficult to recruit and to keep up. And just with the revenue, the way that the organization's revenue structure was set up, the revenue streams, you had to just pay attention to what were your core competencies, which I would say for any business is really, really important. You've got to focus on and prioritize the things that bring in probably the higher dollars that others may not. And so we came to a season to where it's actually when I was in the Townsend program, and it was actually my case study that I took to these executives and these really wise people. And I said, here's the trends. I'm forecasting out what I think this is going to happen. And here's what all the things. And I said, I think I'm having to confront reality that we have to make a necessary ending in this program that I couldn't love more than anything else on the planet right now professionally. And they looked at me and it was breaking my heart. It was actually breaking my heart. And they agreed. And I was hoping they would find a way for it to come. And so having to choose to prioritize the organization as a whole over a program or a product that you really, really love is a challenge for leaders. And it broke my heart to actually be the one to bring the proposal to the table to end the program. And to make a necessary ending is different than quitting. But I was raised in West Texas, and you don't quit.
Right.
You get hurt, you get up and dust it off and put some dirt on it, and you keep going. You don't cry. I was raised, hardcore man, we don't quit no matter what.
Yeah.
I don't care how tired you are. I don't care. You get it done, which is great until it doesn't serve you any well, which is, I think, what I had bought into. I said, hey, if I said I was going to do it, I don't care what it takes. I don't care what has to get sacrificed, sleep, health, whatever, we're getting it done. And I really had to, again, back to Henry Cloud, he wrote a book called Necessary Endings. And there's a big difference between quitting and a necessary strategic ending. And it took me a second because I felt like I was a failure. I felt like I was quitting when really I was being strategic and wise. But man, that gets tangled up for leaders and business owners, because you think, well, if I just try one more harder, let me hang on a little bit longer, which sometimes you do have to persevere, to have the discernment to know when is it time to persevere and when is it time to make a necessary ending is like this epic question. Hence the need for a personal board of directors. That's a big question. You want to get different feedback. And so I would say that was a season that was very difficult for me, was not only to confront the reality that that was what was happening, but then to make the proposal, to make the necessary ending, and then help that walk that out. And so there were some wonderful things on the other side of that, but at the time it felt like I was a failure, or why couldn't we figure it out? And I knew it had nothing to do with, we did everything we could. We truly did.
Yeah.
Seasons matter and markets matter. The economy matters. Competition matters. You've got to be wise. Just because you love something doesn't always mean you get to keep doing it.
Yeah. Accepting when something has come to a natural end and having the discernment, know when to persevere versus when to say, this is it. That's great. We teach our kids a saying we came up with, catch your SIDS never quit. And then my oldest son, after I was a hypocrite in this a few times, he says, catch your SIDS never quit until they do. Anyway, as you were saying all that, I was like, catch your SIDS never quit until we do. But knowing when to quit, it's a good thing. And even it's hard sometimes, which it sounds like it was for you. But man, what a good lesson for all of us.
There's so much in that she articulated so well, but so many principles that we've already talked about. It was having a personal board of directors that will speak truth into you, like looking strategically at what you're doing. And is this profitable? Like, if you can do 100 different things and maybe there's 20 of them that are actually profitable and 20% that aren't, and there's 80 in the middle that are kind of so-so. And so like it's being strategic in that. And I love the necessary endings quote. And I can't remember my summary of that, but it's basically, knowing when to quit is when what you're doing right now no longer has the potential to get the result that you are seeking. And that's like making that decision.
It's good.
It's not quitting. It's a necessary ending. It's strategic. And as business owners, like you need to be doing that at all times. There needs to
Yeah.
be a process of continuous pruning in your business that the things that are no longer serving you, the things that are no longer serving your customer, you got to look at that
Yeah.
often. And I
It's actually a very strategic. I feel like it should be called a strategic planning book because it really is. Because it also doesn't have to mean you're ending something like a program. It could be you're ending a mindset. Like, you know what? If I'm not willing to sit down and help this person grow professionally, I can't be irritated with them for not doing it the way I want them to do it. So it could even be ending mindsets. And you said, Albert, I've got all these little ones. I've got another one for you. So how do people grow? This is another thing that they have. It's truth plus grace over time. How often as leaders are like, well, I'm just going to give it more time. I'm just going to give it more time. But if you don't have truth and grace also mixed in the equation, you might be discouraged and frustrated that things didn't change, or an outside force had to come in and give the truth and grace. And then you lost respect as a leader because you didn't do it. So if you, like, for example, I needed the truth from that group to tell me, Kathy, you've already confronted the reality and we're just going to back you up. There's no path. Even though you're wishing there were another one, there's not. We don't see another path either. That was the truth. The grace is, you know what? We're going to be praying for you because we know this is going to be brutally hard on you to make this call.
Yeah.
And so what is your timeline on when do you plan to unfold this? When do you plan to talk to people? So then they start asking me up the timepiece. Okay, so when is the proposal getting submitted to make this start happening? I'm like, in 10 years. They're like, yeah, no. And they gave me more than 10 minutes. But then the time, there's an appropriate time, right? And so right touch, right time, right location, that's another one that I like to think about. And so, but if you're wanting to help people grow, which is a responsibility of a business leader, how many people are like, why can't these people do it? Why do they keep asking me all these questions? Why am I doing everything? Why can't I delegate it? And they actually do it. Well, you have to help them grow. That means that feedback loops, grace, they're going to make mistakes. Let them make some mistakes first. And then then that's part of learning. If you've been, for example, what learning curve have y'all been on lately? Learning curves are messy. We love to be experts. What's the latest thing you've tried new lately? Well, you were saying some things earlier, but I challenge leaders often. What is something brand new you've tried before? It's going to give you a lot more empathy for your people because you're teaching them new things that you're delegating to them. So be mindful as a leader. Where are the necessary endings? And maybe the necessary ending is I can't keep doing everything by myself. I've got to help my people grow and hand some things off. But how am I going to help them grow? Well, great. That still feels heavy and hard. It doesn't have to be hard if you have all three of those elements in the mix. How are you going to give them feedback on how they're doing? Where are you going to give them grace? Because they're not going to be as good at it as you are at first. And then how much time is realistic for them to learn this new thing that you need them to learn? So you can make the necessary ending to delegate something.
Man, that is so good.
I love that.
Everything you're saying today is just money. So
I know. I'm like,
I needed my notebook.
I know. I needed the truth plus grace is
over time.
Over time is how you get to growth. That's I
good.
mean,
even in yourself,
myself, my church, my business, like everything, like there's got to be both. And that's great. Okay. Big picture. What's in your career? What's a couple of moments that you had some big wins that looking back, you're really proud of, the process that you went through and how you ultimately achieved, something that you're proud of?
Well, I would say that program that I mentioned, when we launched it, man, we skyrocketed in enrollment. It was just, again, it was such a ride. It was so awesome. And so I really am excited that was a season that I had. I also am glad I did have the courage to do that Townsend program. It was actually a very significant financial investment at the time, especially as a young family. And for my husband to look at a 5-figure tuition rate to do a year-long program, plus the time away, plus flying, it was a significant financial investment. And Dr. Jones even looked me in the eye and he says, Kathy, you will never regret investing in yourself. And so I said, okay. And so I go and talk to my husband about it and we're looking at the dollars and the budgets. And he says, okay, let's do it. And so I just will always be so grateful to have him supporting me and cheering me on and having that opportunity, because I feel like it really did get a hold of me at a time where I was buying into the fallacy of bigger, stronger, faster is always best. I don't believe that anymore. I don't believe the racetrack is the only place you can be productive. I believe you can be very productive in a pasture and not feel the having to perform for a crowd and having to be in a very narrow lane and having to stay in the gate until somebody else says it's time to start. I think it's possible to have a completely different mindset, but I was still buying into the faster, bigger, stronger, faster, bigger, stronger, faster. And I just don't believe that anymore. I don't believe you have to do it that way to have the life you want. And so it doesn't mean it's not easy. You still have to work stinking hard. I mean, business is hard. It doesn't, I mean, there have been a lot of external factors in the last few years that have made it even harder. And so I don't want to pretend like this is all like dandelions in some pasture somewhere. I mean, you have to work stinking hard.
Yeah.
But it still doesn't mean you have to run yourself in the ground. If the only way for your business to be successful is if you're running yourself in the ground and destroying relationships, you're doing it wrong and it's not worth it. There's got to be another way to do it.
When you say all of that, and I think about business owners that we talk to and wanting to have that mindset, it's not always about bigger and faster and more. Knowing what is enough and knowing what success looks like in your definition and not just everyone else's definition. When you think about what's coming up for you, what do you get excited about when you think about what? And I guess what I'm trying to hear from you is, what's your definition of success?
So many, right? So many. I think I'm learning there's a difference between success and influence. I don't want to necessarily be famous. I don't necessarily want to be, a billionaire or anything. And not that those are bad pursuits if people choose that. I would say for me, what success looks like is I've made a shift recently. And it's actually on a coffee mug somebody gave me, which is kind of hilarious that it's now become a little mantra for me. And it's, she doesn't beg, force, or chase. She prays, works hard, and has faith. And I've been chewing on this idea of there's a difference between chasing and pursuing. I want to pursue things. I don't want to chase them. I want to offer things. I don't want to beg people and beg, force, or chase. So the force is similar. I don't want to force my own ideas when this may sound odd, but because I'm a Christian, I really do pray a lot for direction. And I do believe the Lord leads me. Yeah. And so, but I can get in my own head and think I'm doing it my way. And he's like, well, isn't that cute? I guess we're going to stay here for a little bit and then we'll figure this out later. But I have found that if I'll kind of relax in a process of not knowing all the answers, because I tend to be very strategic, fast acting, quick decision maker. I want to see results quickly. I sometimes will miss the journey. It's like I'm just skimming life instead of savoring it. So I think for me, moving forward, I want to savor life. I want to have deeply meaningful work that matters while I'm savoring the life that I've been gifted. And so I think that's for me. And so what does that even look like? It probably looks like maybe fewer groups, not more. We're actually about to launch a lot more virtual content so that it frees up some of my times because we're getting more and more requests. And I know I don't have enough time to go around for everyone. So in 2 weeks, we're actually launching a whole thing on my website where all this virtual content is going to be available in different packages for people to get customized however they might like to get it. And then maybe a few more books. There's all these amazing stories out there that we need to be told. So there's a few more books in the future probably too. But I hope along the way I'm savoring it all, not skimming it because I'm running so fast. It's just a blur.
That's awesome. What a great answer. I think a lot of people will relate to that too.
Yeah, and so much of this interview is all about being intentional about what you are pursuing. And I hope that business owners and leaders like hear that and do some discerning while they're listening to that of like, what am I pursuing right now? What season am I in? What am I actively giving more attention and making more of a priority, and doing that on purpose, doing that with intention and knowing where you're trying to ultimately get to. I have heard that over and over and over in her story. Yeah. And we have to do that.
It's perfect. I don't know what else could be said. I'm sure we could go on for a long time here, but I think we're up against it. Time for the fire round.
Let's do it.
Ooh.
All right. What's your favorite movie?
Sound of Music.
Oh, okay. I like it.
She had that ready real fast. So you're a musical person?
I don't know if I'm musical, but when I was in second grade, I got to watch that movie and I loved it ever since. So yes,
Who doesn't love Maria?
I know.
Right.
All right. What is, aside from the Bible, what is your favorite book?
Water from My Heart by Charles Martin. He's my favorite not fiction author. And then there's too many leadership books to pick one. Sorry.
Water for My Heart. It's a
Fiction book by
Fiction
Charles
book.
Martin.
okay. Okay.
He got great books.
I haven't read that one.
Check it out.
I guess so.
All right. What's one piece of advice that's common in your industry that you don't necessarily agree with?
Bigger, faster, stronger always wins.
All right.
David and Goliath, Gladwell's book.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Oh, yeah, that is good. I like that one.
Mhm.
Okay. It fits the theme we had earlier. I like it.
And how can people get in touch with you? How can people do business with you? Where do we send them?
Well, if you just want to go to kathycrockett.com, that's my website. There's all kinds of stuff there that you can do, all kinds of inquiries if you want. I'm on LinkedIn. So either way, works great.
And that's where the content will launch soon, right?
Yes, the virtual content will be available in a few weeks on my website, kathycrockett.com.
Awesome. So by the time this podcast is released, it should be there. So go check it out.
Exciting.
Thank you so much for being a guest.
Yes.
That was great. It over delivered and I appreciate it.
Oh, so fun to be with you guys. This is a great podcast. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
All right. I hope you enjoyed that episode. I know Kellen and I did and got so much out of it. If you enjoyed that and want more where that came from, go ahead and click subscribe and keep coming back because there's more coming up soon. And if you are a business owner and you feel stuck in your business, go to our website, stagcoaching.com, and in the upper right-hand corner, click to book your free consultation. And in your free consultation, we can help tackle the number one issue negatively affecting your business. It's free and it's on our website, stagcoaching.com. Thanks. We'll see you in the next one.